All right, welcome aboard, everybody, and to our third class on Caspar David Friedrich. Oh, I'm gonna try to say Friedrich because I've heard all the professionals say Friedrich, but I might belt back to Friedrich. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about your relationship with Caspar David Friedrich, if you have one. So in the chat, a scale of one, Ron, 0. Okay. A scale of 1 to 10, 1 being nothing at all, and 10, you're a world expert. Where would you rank your knowledge of Caspar David Friedrich or his art? And let's see. Oh, wow. So Ashley, a 6. And I remember, Ashley, you mentioned before that you were looking forward to this presentation. And then Kim, new to you. Marilyn, a 1 as well. Matan, 0. Zach, 1. Lee and Amy, 0 and 0. Oh, Matan, that's right. Nice catching Zach there without the decimal places. And Ashley recently got much more intimate. Okay, excellent. And then let's see, Zach, 1 to signify the one painting I saw in my email today. Ah! Okay, I bet that when you see a few of his works, you'll recognize the works, maybe. And Damon and Susanna, a 0. So Molly, you just joined us. Hey, Molly, just asking everybody what the relationship is with Caspar David Friedrich. Ashley told us that she knows him pretty well, got more intimate with him recently, like a 6. And Molly, you don't know him at all. This is fascinating. It surprises me a little bit. It surprised me a little bit. So I'd say probably my relationship with him before this was, yeah, I probably know one of his famous ones. Yeah, I'd say my relationship was like a 3 or 4, and I certainly have learned a lot more about his art, and of course about his life and so forth. And then if you have had any kind of viewing of his art, seen any of his images, would you give a sense of how much you liked his work, like on a scale of 1 to 10, to be original? 1 being not at all, and 10 being I just love his work so much. If you have seen any of his works. So Marilyn, a 6, Ashley, a 7. Okay. And Ron, the one I sent, didn't care for much. Okay, roger that. Okay, good. So thank you for that feedback. And I would say probably my relationship with him, I'd say he's been a solid 8 for me. He's an artist that I've really liked for a long time and really liked a lot of the artworks. Yeah, Molly, I sent an email earlier today, maybe middle of the day. And then Damon and Susanna, you're asking, who is he? Oh, okay, didn't get anything. I'll double check whether I've got you in my email list and make sure you get that. Maybe it's in the junk mail. It's a group email. I'll make sure I'll double check on that. And then Damon and Susanna, you're asking, who is he? Is that just who is Caspar David Friedrich, or is there something else there? And feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, there's a technique for unmuting I learned recently. Just if you don't have your cursor in the chat, you just push the space bar down, and that should work to unmute you. Okay, great. No idea who he is. Fantastic. Okay, so here we go. I'd like to start off with a little bit of background. This is the guy. This is not a self-portrait, so this is not bringing Caspar to the people. This is not a self-portrait, but I think it pretty accurately captures maybe a lot of his personality that I've seen through his works and the self-portraits that he has done. You can get a sense of the dates there, 1774 to 1840, and kind of place it a little bit in history. Revolutionary time period, so 1776, Declaration of Independence, 1789, storming of the Bastille, then Napoleon rises. And he's situated in in what was modern day Germany. That's where he's situated. So I am going to give you a little bit of background on him to begin with, and very quick dose before to just give you a sense of the time period, because we're gonna talk to Caspar and ask him about the personal connections he makes with the artworks, but we are going to spend, of course, a lot of time with the artworks. But just some quick background, and I've got 3 words for you. 3 words. Here's the first one: pantheism. And this is the artwork that I sent out earlier, and we're not going to spend too much time on it, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste and to talk about this concept. Are you familiar with the concept of pantheism? Okay, a lot of no's, great. Molly, yes. All right. So of course, with most artists in the Western tradition, you have ties to religion. And pantheism is a religious concept. Now, Caspar himself was born in a family of 10 to a pretty well off, I think, soap merchant, soap maker. And his father was a strong Lutheran Protestant. So got some more Protestantism. We had a Protestant last time with Rembrandt, and now we have another born into Protestantism. But his ideas kind of evolved from there. And he was influenced by a priest who had these strong ideals of pantheism. And pantheism is the idea that God and the Spirit of God is in nature. It's not just in the cross, it's not just in the church, it's not just in the Bible, it's not just in your good deeds. It is embodied by natural phenomenon, by the sunrise, by the trees, by the air, and go out in nature and enjoy nature, and you are connecting with God. And the reason I have this particular image here is I think it's a great visual metaphor for that pantheism that became instilled in Caspar. When you see nature, he was also seeing a concretized spiritual experience. This artwork, the crucifixion, was his coming out party and was very controversial at the time period. It was commissioned by someone who wanted it for their chapel. And if you're commissioning something for a chapel, if you're commissioning a crucifixion for a chapel, you expect to get something like this, where you get to see Jesus, and you get to see, you know, maybe some of those who are at the crucifixion. But here, the crucifixion that he's got is not even head on; it's turned away. And the primary thing that you're seeing is this mountain. And so the controversy was he was turning this religious subject into a landscape. And so this was the first time, and one of the few times, he actually defended his ideas for this landscape to counter a lot of the critical reception he was receiving. And those ideas were steeped in pantheism. Mm-hmm. Right, Damon? And Susanna, nobody else crucified, right? And Marilyn, you like the beautiful sky and the strobe lights, and Caspar would say, you know what, that beautiful sky and those strobe lights, that is God setting on the world, acknowledging the last time that his presence is going to be in this world. Roger that, Ron. All right, next word I've got, feudalism. This might be a little bit odd to bring up here because we are far from the medieval time period or the Dark Ages where feudalism was present, but the political concept of feudalism was around, and I want to promise it's gonna be relevant to some of the art. I'm not gonna delve too much into it, but I just want to indicate a little bit here. This is a map from Europe from 1800. From 1800, so before Napoleon starts to take over. But you can also already see you've got the French Republic which is just the empire that's going to expand. You've got the Kingdom of England over here. You've got the Kingdom of Prussia. You've got the Austrian monarchy. So you've got a lot of monarchies. You've got a lot of nations, Kingdom of Spain. But right in the middle, you've got this kind of crazy jigsaw puzzle of ripped up little pieces of paper. And all those are little dukedoms, duchies, little principalities, kingdoms. They are all scattered under their own administration of their own leader. That's the area that would later become Germany. But at this time period, it was under a feudalistic system. And the feudalistic system was this control of territory, not by a king, but by a noble. And they have the power. And so you have all these scattered kingdoms, and I think Caspar would end up living in Saxony for a long time. He came from a town on the Baltic coast, and I'm going to put an X right up there, called Greifswald, which wasn't even part of Germany at the time, but is part of Sweden. But this would become an important part of one of his main values, and that was his nationalism. His idea that the Germanic people needed their own country. So he developed this strong sense of patriotism and wanted to get out of this feudalism. All right, so that's that second word. And let me clear all my markings, and let's go to the third thing. Napoleon. So shortly after the French Revolution, Napoleon takes charge, and he's got a vision for delivering Europe and establishing his own empire. And right in the sights of that empire are all those duchies and little tiny kingdoms and the feudalistic states, Germanic states. This is a scene of Napoleon at the Battle of Vienna. And the Battle of Vienna was the battle in 1806, the big battle that would crush most of those Germanic states and would lead to Napoleon marching into the city of Dresden, where Caspar lived. So, pantheism, feudalism, and Napoleon. And as you can imagine, Caspar was not a big fan of Napoleon at all. But that was a politically touchy subject because every little dukedom and kingdom responded to Napoleon differently. But Caspar was not excited. So if we're going to look at the upheavals in his life, Napoleon coming around and bringing war to his city, his realm, is definitely one. All right. Any quick questions, any observations there? I'm glad I did that in about 10 minutes. I'm happy with that. That's great, real quick. Thanks, Ron. All right, Roger. Excellent. So let's get to some art. And thanks, Lee. I recommend having a piece of paper for this. We're going to start with an artwork here, and I'll give you guys 3 minutes to have your own personal spiritual experience. Yeah, Kim, that's a nice connection. That's a nice connection. So 3 minutes, write out your reading. And remember, one of the things about your reading of an artwork, the analysis of the artwork is not the most important thing there. In fact, it's completely secondary. It's your words and your observations that for that 3 minutes, that's a sacred experience that you're having. And I think Caspar would agree, your personal bonding connection in words. Of course, Amy, title first. And in the chat, put a title in for this. All right, what did you see? And remember, the title is just your first impression. All right, great. Let's see what we have here. Amy, a moment of rest. Kim, meeting in the trees. Matan, the coming dawn. Lee, a new day together. Molly, reflecting by moonrise. Ron, nature's beauty. All right, great. I'm going to turn off my video. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock and take this opportunity to commune with the art with your words. Okay, and I'll have a couple of close-ups as well. Here it is. Take another 30 seconds or so. If you can, throw in a quote in there. Throw in a quote for one or both of the characters. So recommend sounds and other sensations. All right, start to wrap up your experience. And once you've done so, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, I see Zach, Amy, Lee, Kim, and Molly are ready to go. Well, just lift with the other hand like this, Marilyn, if you're having some trouble. Sorry, that's some tech humor there. Okay. All right, if you're still wrapping up, keep going, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Now, as we go through these classes, I'm going to invite you more and more to share your readings. And if anybody would like to start off by sharing theirs, go ahead and raise your hand, or if, I can share mine to start with as well, however you like. And let's see, Ron, you're sharing something in the chat there. Do you want to go ahead and read that to us, Ron? It will be fun to hear your voice with those words.
Okay, actually misspelled. I meant quiet as in no sign, not quiet.
No worries.
Yeah, it seemed like quiet. There's tenderness, at least from her. Some tension too. Feels a little enchanted. And it's hard to see, but I wonder if his hand is reaching over his own shoulder to cap her hand, and that would bring tenderness from both sides. It's hard to tell on this screen. Also, I'm wondering, are we seeing both sun and moon? When you closed up, got closer in, the two of them over there. You know, one in the center, the yellow, and a little bit off to the upper right, a little, it's kind of whitish, maybe just a reflection. I don't know.
All right. Great,
so,
Ron.
Yeah. And I'm also wondering about the lower left. There's something there that looks like a structure that we don't, use some.
A little bit of wood or something there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's something significant there.
Right.
That's
All
it.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you, Ron. So that's very interesting that you're looking at that intimate interaction between the two and wondering especially if his hand might be placed over his shoulder like this on hers. Okay. And then Amy, you're wondering that too. And Ashley, imagine both hands propped atop a walking stick or cane. His posture is so upright and dignified. Mary Eileen, I see your hand up. Would you like to share yours?
Yes, it was interesting what Ron said, because I had finally come up with a title, which was Sun Rising, Moon Fading. And I really like the mood that the painting creates, and it seems hopeful and expectant, as if the two of them are either expecting something good to happen, or maybe that something not good is ending, that they've gotten through it. And their posture is straight and firm, like they're in control, but also the woman's hand on the man's shoulder is supportive. And I get the impression that they've been through something difficult and come through it, and they feel like they can support each other and feel good about it and move forward with life.
All right, that's great, Mary Elaine. And you know what, my follow-up question, if you want to give it some thought, what quotes would you give? So that's what my follow-up question would be. Okay. So think about that some. Okay. Would anybody else like to read their reading? I'll take one or two more. All right. Let's see. Matan, yeah, go for it.
So I said, husband and wife face away in the middle of the forest towards the sun. Birds are in the distance. They have come here for one thing, the beauty of nature. The couple are quiet. God is great, she says quietly to her husband.
All right, that's fantastic. So a couple things that you're identifying there is why they've come. They've come to contemplate the beauty of nature. And I like that quote. They're here, and she says something like, God is great, as they're observing this phenomenon. And I like that you're imagining the birds as well. Okay, fantastic. Shall I read mine, or is anybody else want to jump in? Last call. It's always really fun to hear the variety of different voices and to hear what words you use. It could be an eclipse. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, so there's some debate about whether this is morning or this is night. So here's mine, just as, well, you know what? Let me back up on that. Let's not do mine. Damon and Susanna, one of you like to share? And let's see, Damon and or Susanna, you're still muted if you're trying to speak. Oh, I think you go up in the participant list and you click on that, or if you want to, you can try to hold down the space key. Oh, you're on.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a more complicated setup than before. I see the two of them supportive, not necessarily lovers, but maybe sister and brother, or when in some way together, obviously. But I also see them looking at, well, they're in a natural setting. They're looking at, you know, the sun. It's not a sunrise. It's a sun that's been up for a few hours, but they're admiring that. But their erect posture and she seems to be supporting him. And he is obviously dressed not to just enjoy a day in the countryside. To me, it looks to me like they're confronting something with other people in society, that it looks to me like he has to go down there, or they have to go down maybe where people are, and it won't be the same beautiful world he confronts or they confront that they're in now. That's what I see.
All right, that's great. So Damon, you're looking at that supportive relationship that they have, and then you're maybe imagining that on the other side of this forest there's a village or a town, and that they are about to go and face that. Okay.
It looks like to me. It looks like they're looking at the sun, but prepared for something that's coming that they have to confront.
So the way that they're standing suggests some type of some type of strength.
Dressed.
And the way they're dressed too. Okay.
Because I wouldn't normally go out like that just to watch a sunrise.
Yeah, maybe. But I'm imagining also perhaps it's cold here. But that hat suggests maybe it's kind of, yeah. So I'm wondering about the style of time. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing those observations. I'll read what I have here, and it's not going to give you much more insight, but I like just giving you some thoughts, some extra little details I'm noticing, and maybe some things that don't sound great. All right, so here we go. Two figures, a man, tall with his hat, and a woman wearing a dark shawl stand side by side, staring out to the bright moon. It's quiet and still around them, but that large oak tree looks like it wants to rip itself out of the ground. The man's hand is raised, perhaps in a cane. They don't pay attention to the menacing claw-like roots beside them. The surroundings are creepy, but they are taking comfort with each other, experiencing the beauty. And she might say something like, how beautiful the moon is tonight. All right, so a couple of details here. And Ashley, it's good to be here with you, a man of action and stillness, together in solitude, present in this moment, ready for what lies ahead. All right, great. So Marilyn, I remember you were mentioning something about what had happened, and now they're taking in beauty, and maybe they're also thinking about what lies ahead here. So a couple of details I want to point out. This is indeed a moon, and there are two clues that might suggest this. Now, it's really bright, and when I first saw this, maybe I was thinking sun too, but you might be able to see like a small crescent shaped, which made somebody suggest that it might be an eclipse. But that small crescent shape at the bottom is the sliver of a new moon, which is really bright. And then beside it is a star or a planet, maybe Venus. And they are taking in this site together. Maybe they've walked here in this dark forest. But whatever it is, whether they're going forward or they are coming for just a moment and they've experienced a lot backwards, at this moment, they are pausing. They are pausing to take in the sight of nature, the moon, and to maybe feel the quiet around them. So it's a rejuvenative experience. And the situation I'm imagining is one where you're going someplace to find some kind of solace or for some kind of contemplation. This is a nightly occurrence, the moon like this. It's not like going to the Grand Canyon and being awed by it. So, but it is a place that's kind of a little bit outside the rim. There's no other human presence at all. It doesn't really look like there's much of a path here. So the follow-up question I have is, where do you go for solemn contemplation? What is a place like this that you go to where you might look out at nature maybe and do it to just pause? Yeah, Kim, I'll jump in with a headgear thing. And I'm glad you're thinking about the headgear. The hat here is a typical kind of hat that a gentleman would wear at the time. And Marilyn, even though I thought it was a sun, atmosphere reminds me of the Song of the Moon from Rusalka, the opera Rusalka. So I'm curious, would you share some of a place that you might go to that's kind of like this? What comes to mind for you? Molly, your garden. Matanda Beach. Amy, outside on your deck where there's always some kind of animal life stirring around, deer, squirrel, birds. It's so peaceful. Ashley, the Cliff House in Maine in winter, when the tourists have yet to arrive. Yes, the tourists haven't arrived here. And Zach, the coast here in British Columbia. And Kim, inside of you. And you know what, Kim, Caspar might say something. He had some interesting quotes about that. He might say something like, the art that I'm showing outside is actually something inside of me. Ron, Michelangelo was David last year. So I'll share a quick one here. And also going to the on forest runs. And Susanna at the beach after curfew at 6 p.m. Yeah, great. And speaking of the beach, last weekend I went to the beach too for the first time in a long time, and the beach is a place I go to for this kind of experience. And I went to the beach to catch the sunrise, which I don't usually go to, but seeing that natural phenomenon, sunrises are fast. Just 3 minutes, the sun goes from not there to completely there. Yeah, and so here's a photo. of just the stillness of the morning. There were a few people. It was a Sunday morning, but the ocean and then just the movement of the sun rising. And as I'm looking at the sun, I'm also away from everything else. This is in near Wilmington, North Carolina, where I live. It's called Wrightsville Beach. The sun rising over the ocean is just wrong. Yeah. Got it. Pacific coasters. So that's one personal connection, and one that puts me in the place a little bit more of these two. So, of course, the natural question that we're going to ask as part of this course is, Caspar, where do you go for solemn contemplation? And here's what he might answer. I often go to the Elbe Valley. I also go to the island of Rügen, and the Elbe Valley is, the Elbe River is near Dresden, where he lived most of his adult life. And the island of Rügen is in the Baltic Sea, where not far from his hometown of Greifswald, and he would often go back there. So a couple of spots, and he loved nature, and he went out into nature all the time. And I'll be sharing a few more little anecdotes about that. But before I go on a little bit more, this is something that he might share about this particular kind of contemplation. He was a big fan of the moon. And unlike Rembrandt, who did not have any books except for a Bible, Caspar had lots of books, and Caspar wrote. And to my amazement, he wrote some poetry. I haven't found much. I've only found one poem by Caspar, and I'm on the lookout for more. But he wrote about his experience with the moon. And I'm going to share that with you. And I've got the first lines of that poem. It's a short poem, just 10 lines. But I'll share that with you to give you a sense of how powerful and significant a moon and watching it and seeing it and the moonlight felt for him. And maybe it might give us an indication of why the moonlight's so bright here. Here it is. Moon, your silver shine. Yeah, it should be silver. Thanks, not sliver, but it could be sliver, yeah. Your silver shine, pale and grave, peers through dark clouds. Owls, your hoots horribly resound throughout the desolate fir forest. Alone I stand here and afraid. Terror seizes me more and more. Will no more joy ever appear from afar? Yes. I see through the tree trunks a faint hope, a dim shimmer. Alas, it is the remains of a long forgotten splendor. So this poem is not about this particular painting. It's more about the experience of going out into the forest and then seeing the moonlight through the trees. And that moonlight is a sign of hope. Now, he's not alone here. If I were to ask him, when have you been in a position like that? He's with somebody else. There's a man and a woman. And mildly, you're noticing 3 types of trees: sadness, fear, and hope outstretched. Oh yeah, the weeping willow, that creepy oak, and then the fir trees. I think Caspar would enjoy that interpretation. Trees were like characters for him. Maybe those drooping leaves, yeah. So I've got a follow-up question for Caspar in this. Do you ever go with anyone out to contemplate like the figure here is doing? And he would probably say, nope, not for most of his life. Until he was married at the age of 44. And after he got married, he and his wife would do things like this. This was his wife, Carolina Balmer. And Carolina was 25 years old when he was 44. And she was very understanding of his kind of lonely ways. For him, marriage was a little bit of a shock. There's one letter that I found there where he describes kind of the oddness or strangeness of having somebody else in the house. There's somebody in the kitchen making dinner. And it's how odd it is that I have to start considering all my decisions with her in them. This is not a portrait by Caspar of his wife. He didn't do many portraits. I don't think he did any of his wife, but he included her in his paintings frequently. So much so that when this painting was cataloged after his death, his good friend, Johann Christian Dahl, himself a landscape painter, looked at it and immediately put a title to it, Caspar and Carolina, the artist and his wife. I want to show you another work of Caspar and Carolina. So you see two figures on a ship. Don't see anybody else. And off in the distance, maybe the dawn. The sails are full of wind moving forward, and far off, tender sailing. That's your title, Ron? That's great. And far off in the distance, you have this kind of, beautiful fantasy-like land that they're going to. They were married in 1818, and this painting was done by Caspar in 1819. In 1819, the year after they married. So he seemed to have had a strong bond with his wife. And of course, Molly, as you were looking at the metaphors of the trees, there's so many metaphors that Caspar is looking here. That's kind of his idea with pantheism. Everything is a religious metaphor. Here, this is a life metaphor. Two people off on a ship. A ship is a life, the journey of life, and they're going off to this fantastical city. And Molly, that's an interesting observation. He doesn't have faces. And here's how I would ask that question. Perhaps he wasn't good at faces. The question I'd ask is, what is the effect of not including faces? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. What is the effect of having the figures looking out at the same scene that we are? Interesting observations. So we have two kinds of experiences that he's sharing here. And Amy, I like that thought there at the bottom. We're invited to think about, to put ourselves in their position and to contemplate their contemplation. So they are doing something. Their situation, each of these set of character situations is doing something, and their action is to contemplate. Yeah, Ashley, you're invited to contemplate with them. So in the first one, at the top there, they're in their ship, heading off into the future and contemplating that together hand in hand. And then at the bottom, maybe a respite from the world and together contemplating the soothing hope of the moonlight. So that's a taste of Caspar David Friedrich. Any quick thoughts before we go to or questions before we go to our Caspar parade? Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Lee. Oh, and I've got George here with her bells. You might hear George's bells as she's going around. I forgot to put her in her room. Okay. I might bring her to her room in a few moments. So, George is my cat, and I've got bells on her so she doesn't get lost. Yeah, George is a her. Yeah. Okay. So, Caspar Parade. All right, let's do this. I'm going to show you 6 artworks, titles for each of these. And then the idea here is we are entering into Caspar's realm. So after we go through all these 6, then I'm going to ask you for 3 words that describe your emotions or the emotional experience of being in the universe of Caspar. But first, titles. Let's see, I'll turn off my video during this time. And when you're ready for the Caspar Parade, please raise your hand. All right, let's do it. Excellent. Here we go. Thank you, everybody. Number 1. And quick title for that one. Shackleton, Superman's Ice Palace. Broken, but shall be rebuilt. Power of nature. Shipwreck. Born of wreckage. Home repairs. Icy disaster. All right, great. And Susanna, you've got failure of conquest. Whoa. Okay. Here's the next one. Maybe some of you have seen this one before. Quick title. Top of the world is mine. Your idea of a dreamboat. Wind tossed. Above the fog. Man with a view. Damon, you've got I shall go. Zach, ascent. Susanna, decision to travel. Kim, walking tour. Yeah, that's probably the one that many of you have seen a lot. Next. Gazing away again. Ships coming home. Homecoming. The fading day. Watching the ships come in. Watching the action. Incoming ships. Good ships. Oh, Susanna, you've got the letters arrive. That's intriguing. All right. Here's the next one. Halloween, spooky, desolation, creepy, gravity. Marilyn, you've got graveyard, the forgotten, dead inside, apocalypse of faith. All right, Damon. And Susanna, destruction of ego. Oh my goodness. Okay, next. Lost, storm coming in, solo, feeling small. And Ron, you've got some question marks. Alone and unsheltered, watching the storm. Ashley, you've got swallowed. And Damon, man is fog? Man is fog or man in fog? I'm curious which one it is. Oh, man in the fog of the universe. All right. Next one. Savannah Realm, morning glory, queen of all, triumphant, sunrise for a good day, soak it in. And Molly recognizes herself. All right, great. Susanna has the Empress. Ooh. All right. So these are wonderful. I'm going to take you back through the 6. I'll show them to you again. We'll have them all together. And think of those 3 words that you'd use to describe the emotions, primarily the emotions of being in this realm. They don't have to apply to all of them. Try to see if you can make them apply to a lot of them. But if there's one particular one that has a strong feeling, go with that and see if that goes with others. Now, don't push enter in the chat, but raise your hand when you have your 3. I'm also going to show you the Norman Rockwell and Rembrandt images to give you some comparison. So here they are from the beginning again. Had this wreckage. The man on top of the world. The figures watching the ships come in. This apocalypse of faith. A person swallowed up by the fog. And Molly Johnson, the Empress of all. All right, so those are, that's what your daughter's calling you now. Here's a little bit of those comparison images just to recapture a little bit. Remember Norman Rockwell. fun, light, optimistic, social. And Rembrandt, dramatic, dark, melancholy. And Caspar. So raise your hand when you have your 3 words. And Ashley, I'm seeing your comment about soak it in, or versus your initial impression. So raise your hand when you have your 3 words. All right, I've got Ashley, Marilyn, Lee, Molly, Damon and Susanna, and Amy. So keep typing if you're still thinking about it, but if you've got them, go ahead and push enter. All right, let's see. Molly, you've got still, expansive, and isolated. Marilyn, drama, nature, and clouds. Amy, reverence, contemplation, and grandeur. Lee, solitude, contemplation, and atmosphere. And Ron, powerful nature and optimism. Matan, contemplation, awe, and nature. And Zach, you've got awe-inspiring, isolated, and hope. And as I'm reading these, I'm looking to the artworks to see how they match up. Kim, questing, soliloquy, and skies. Interesting there, word choice there, Kim. Kim, would you share with us what you mean by soliloquy and what it is that you're seeing? And if you'd like to, feel free to unmute yourself. So Kim, you're thinking aloneness. Yeah, speaking alone. Thinking alone. Yeah. Okay. Ashley, you've got expansive, intimate, reflective, and solemn. Susanna, you've got glory, desolation, and waiting. And Damon, you've got life, earth, and grandeur. Yeah, all right, these are great. And I'm seeing a kind of mixture. There's grandeur and awe in a lot of these, but also at the same time, isolation. And Amy, you like the word stillness. Okay, fantastic. I'd like to share a little bit here before we go on with some more of Caspar's words and of the experience that he would describe, not of his art, but of his experiences of nature. And so what I'm going to read here is, there are going to be some of his words, but a lot of this description is from, I think it's from a friend of his that was describing third person. some of Caspar's actions when it came to nature. So here it is. When a storm was raging fiercely and the foam-crested waves were at their highest, he would stand outdoors, soaked to the skin by the spray or a sudden shower of rain, simply gazing at it all with a passionate expression on his face, as if he could never get his fill. Whenever a storm with thunder and lightning moved over the sea, he would hurry out to the top of the cliffs as if he had a pact of friendship with the forces of nature, or even went out into the oak wood where the lightning had split a tall tree from top to bottom, which led him to murmur, "How great, how mighty, how wonderful." Okay. Yeah, great, mighty, wonderful, a pact of friendship with nature, the terrifying parts of it. He enjoyed it and he reflected it in his art. Zach, absolutely. Captain Dan, when he's lost his legs and he needs to have it out with God. And so he's at the top of the prow of the ship. Mm-hmm. And they're in the middle of the storm out in the sea. Yeah. Okay. We're going to do a second Caspar, and we're just going to do one more Caspar. So we're not going to go for, I'm trying to keep the classes down to an hour and 15 minutes and not go too far beyond that. So we'll have one more Caspar and then we'll wrap up. I think it'll be worth it. I'm going to kind of cheat, Molly. I'm going to pack in a second Caspar like I did for the first one. So for this reading, let's just do it together in the chat. As you're making observations, just type them in the chat and type a phrase at a time, a sentence at a time, and we'll just keep that chat rolling as a kind of communal reading of the artwork with each of your observations, and you can see others and build on others' observations. First, the title. Here it is. Okay, quick title for that one. Well, he started off sadly. Christmas Alone. Snowy Clearing. Choosing a Christmas Tree. Winter Walk. The Plentiful Earth. A Walk in the Forest. The Christmas Clearing. Winter Forest. And Susanna, you've got In the Middle of the Mystery. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. And Damon, don't bother to put anything down because it's not going to compare to Susanna's. All right. Marilyn, you've got, oh, Rockwell's is more upbeat. Yeah, that's a good observation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's spend some time with this image. I'll have some close-ups, but just describe what it is that you're seeing in the chat, or what it is that you're feeling, what you're noticing. What are some of the implications of being in this place? Immerse yourself. Tree stumps cut. I will in a moment, Marilyn. But I like to kind of start off big picture and then we'll get into the details. So offer up ideas, suggestions, and then we'll look more closely. Ashley, you've got, I think I see the saw. Ron, interestingly, here is the light looking into the dark. Here's the light looking into the dark. So you're imagining he's looking into the dark, Ron? Is that what you're saying? And Molly, you've got very tall trees around and a little snow dusting. Amy, the young trees where the forest had been cut, the older trees ahead. Foreground is young trees. Okay, so let's take a closer look. And I'm still curious about that comment, Ron, looking into the dark. Are you imagining that the figure is looking into the dark?
What I mean is, unlike the first, some of the others where people are in the light looking to, in dark looking into light, like the first one we looked at, here is in the light looking into darkness, which project less optimism than some of the others.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, let me go to the closer one here. So Matan, you have whatever he has already cut down is nothing compared to the vastness of what there is and the rest of nature around him. Marilyn, you've got, he looks tiny and cold and lonely. Molly, the forest is kind of scary. The snow is so bright in contrast. And Amy, you've got that crow, so you could probably hear cawing a little bit. Isn't the crow's wing kind of a little bit fluttering and indicating some kind of motion, maybe? Okay, let's take a closer look at the figure, maybe. Don't cut another tree, says the crow. It's hard to see. We don't get much. Of course, another figure from the back. His mid-caw. Molly, you're thinking soldier. Any clues that suggest soldier there? And then you've got after man alters nature, it still comes back. Crow's at a dark mood. Molly, you're looking at that helmet thing on his head. Oh, and Damon and Susanna, you're noticing a sword, maybe? A heavy cloak, a rifle, helmet and gun. Okay. And here's an interesting view. And Ron, I can see a little bit more of what you're talking about. Where he's staring is into that darkness. And Damon and Susanna, you got the shoulders slumped. Oh yeah, it's not like the man who's holding onto the, who has his arm raised, holding onto the cane. His posture is uncertain. Maybe he's wondering who cut the tree. Possibly, but I wonder if you might be looking at the tree trunks, if that, to indicate if you were wondering that. Looks like he, let's see, Matan, he has leggings like a soldier. Oh, leggings like a soldier. And then Kim, you're imagining him saying to himself in his soliloquy, where do I go now? And Mary Lane, he puts far more detail into the nature of his paintings than he does the people portion. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we have a figure here who's looking maybe for a path and instead just sees the darkness. We've got a couple more. Molly, got to go toward the house of the people who cut the trees. Maybe they have presents. Yeah. Susanna, he's listening to the forest, awaiting his faith. I mean, there must be all kinds of things in the forest there. It makes you think a little bit of a lot of those fantasy movies, like The Hobbit or something, where there's a figure who's about to go into the Mirkwood or some other forest like that. If it's a saw, it looks like he lowered in resignation. Owls and creepy animal noises. And as she said, it would affect him to see him walking back with a tree, but he's walking away without what I would imagine he's gone here for. He could be in enemy territory. So Ron, this is a contrast you brought up a little bit earlier, right? There is no moonlight through those trees, no sign of hope. He's come here and there is just these tall, daunting specters. And he's traveling just through here. It's not his destination. No, he's probably traveling, but is he going to go through there? So it looks like he's faced some kind of barrier, some kind of overwhelming, haunting. Can we see his footprints? You know what? Let me go back and take a closer look. It's hard to tell, but it's maybe from the trunk a little bit, but not much more, right? Crows are symbols of bad luck and definitely death. Yeah, you don't want to face a crow. So the situation you find yourself here in this one is very different than the situation in the scene of the two figures looking at the moon. It's not one of solemn contemplation where you stopped and are taking in some beauty. It's one where you're taking in some something that's dark and overwhelming. So then that's what I would ask you here. Actually, let me skip this part here. And I'll ask you this. When have you come face to face with the overwhelming and maybe the overwhelming dread? When have you come face to face with that? Yeah, Damon, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that. I don't want to, I think I put it, the flow of the discussion has changed the direction I want to go into. So shall I tell, I'll tell a quick anecdote of something that makes me think of this. I'm facing 3 kids at home in the quarantine. They're much cuter than these trees though. So one particular story I'll share that I think makes me feel like I'm in the position of being alone, overwhelmed by the vastness of something that makes me feel powerless, was about 15 years ago. I was on a sailing trip with my mom and my dad, just the 3 of us in a sailboat. And we're taking a sailboat down to the Caribbean, and we're about 200, 300 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. And it was amazingly calm. No wind at all, not one speck of wind, and the ocean was as flat as a swimming pool. And we're talking 300 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. We know like a mile depth, maybe more. And it's as flat as a swimming pool. So we had the motor on the whole time, and we stopped the motor. When we stopped the motor, we're just sitting there. And I've got the bright idea, you know what? Let me dive into the swimming pool and swim around a little bit. It'll be fun. I would normally go swimming out in the middle of the ocean. So that's what I do. I jump off and I dive in. And I dive in with my eyes closed, and I come up and I look around me underwater, and I just see all the blue around me. And then I turn my head down and I look down. And that was the mistake, because what I see down there is just darkness. Darkness. And suddenly I feel like I'm going to fall. And I get out of there. It's one of the most frightening natural phenomena experiences that I can remember. And I can imagine something kind of similar going on here, just feeling overwhelmed by something in nature. If swimming in a very deep lake is kind of like that too. Yeah. You might experience it maybe looking at the mountain you have to climb. You want to do that now? Or being lost in the woods. So the question I'd ask Caspar, when have you felt overwhelmed by nature? And Marilyn, you think you just saw him move? So Caspar would probably say, I felt overwhelmed by nature all the time, but I'd like to read something else that Caspar shared here. And this is a description of his experience of when he goes out by himself. And here it is. He's by himself out in nature. Everything is silence. Silence. Silence around me. The silence does me good. It is true. But I wouldn't like to always have it around me to such a high degree. Narrator comes in. He once related how he had lived for an entire week among rocks and trees, never meeting another human being, adding, quote, I really cannot recommend this method to anyone else. It is almost too much for me. It is almost too much for me. Gloom invades my soul. He loves nature and feels overwhelmed by it. Now, why am I bringing this one up? I'll tell you in a moment, because I want to talk about another moment of nature, a specific life experience of nature overwhelming Caspar. And I brought this image back, and you can probably tell, maybe if you didn't notice before, do you see the ship? And we've seen that metaphor that he uses, the ship in life, or the ship is the journey of life, and we have this metaphorical journey of life. That's a good paint and use for that, Molly. We have this metaphorical journey of life ending among the ice break. I like to try to find stories from childhood for the artists, what they were interested in childhood, or some pivotal moments. You might remember from Norman Rockwell that the thing that frightened him when he was a kid, seeing that in New York City, that woman with the umbrella chasing that man, the drunk woman yelling at him in the middle of the night, and that when he was 6 years old, that marked him. Well, Caspar had a similar kind of traumatic experience with nature. And I don't think he speaks to this directly, but others, his contemporaries, speak to this. And when he was 7 years old, he had a lot of siblings. Remember, he had 10 siblings. A couple of them died before he was out of childhood. But he had an older brother who was 13. And they were out on the ice one day. And Caspar fell into the ice, fell into the water in the ice. And his brother saved his life, pulled him out. And then his brother fell in. And Caspar, being 7 and his brother 13, he couldn't do anything about it. And his brother drowned. And that seemed to have been something that marked him, and maybe marked that, became part of that relationship that he has with going out into nature, the danger of it, yet his fascination with it. So we have a figure here by themselves, just like we have this ship by themselves, and we can maybe imagine that just as the ship was crushed by this ice flow, maybe these trees are going to overwhelm this figure. Now, if you were there in 1813 to see this artwork on display, you might see the figure and recognize the figure as a kind of person, a soldier, but a particular kind of soldier, a French soldier. In 1813, after Napoleon's troops were leaving Russia, having been overwhelmed there, they were coming back through, and the fight against Napoleon and the French occupants was starting, and there was turmoil everywhere. So Caspar wanted to react to that turmoil and maybe share a little bit of what he felt about it and how he felt about the social upheaval that was going on around him. This is a French dragoon surrounded by other French dragoons. And this is actually another scene from the Battle of Vienna from 1806 when they were victorious. And you might be able to tell slightly that crazy helmet-looking thing at the top to be able to connect to the two figures together. So you have a French soldier, not surrounded by a bunch of his mates, but by himself, facing this landscape, this unfamiliar Germanic landscape of tall fir trees, maybe in the Black Forest, maybe with the Tannenbaums, if we're speaking about Christmas trees. The tall Germanic fir trees overwhelming this lonely French soldier. So what is Caspar saying in this artwork? Us Germanic pantheists are going to get you. Yeah. Schwarzenwald, yeah. Whatever enemy there is, we will defeat it. It will be overwhelmed. So Caspar is taking that feeling that he has about nature, that we have if we put ourselves in the French soldier's place, of feeling this dread, awe in the face of something that is too much for us. And those trees are Germany. And that's what's causing that dread awe to this French soldier. Yeah, Molly, you could extend the metaphor that way too. Those couple of trunks might be the limited conquests of the French soldiers, but there's so much more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. I think you know what I'll do? We'll do a wrap up here. We're already at 23 past the hour of the, so 1 hour and 23 minutes in. So we'll wrap up here. I'll show this. I didn't do it for the other classes, but I want to, it might be helpful to kind of as a little culmination here. As a differentiation between Caspar and a figure you might be familiar with, Bob Ross. Have you guys seen these Bob Ross figures, Bob Ross painting videos? He was very famous. And when I look at Bob Ross and I hear him speak, it's so fundamentally a different kind of spirit than Caspar. So I'll share a little bit here. I'm going to scoot up. Oh, thanks. Let me pause it and I forgot to share my computer sound. Let me do that. Thanks, Damon. So let me do that. And here you go.
Let's decide. Maybe there's a happy tree, evergreen tree. He lives right there. Start with just touching the canvas. Use just the corner of the brush, just the corner.
Can you hear it now?
And begin pushing, making the bristles bend slightly downward. See there? Look at that. Isn't that a nice little tree? And he lives right here in this brush. All you have to do is sort of push him out. Each time you start a new evergreen, reload the brush to a nice sharp chisel edge. Go through the same procedure. Let's have another one. Maybe he lives right there. Just make a decision and drop him in. Wherever you want him. There he goes. There he goes.
All right. So I imagine what would a Caspar David Friedrich painting show look like? It would not be cute little evergreens or happy little trees. There he goes off to his death. You look on Bob Ross with existential dread. Yeah. All right. So with that, a quick recap. So we've seen for Caspar that nature is something that can be overwhelming, but also a place of solace and contemplation, and maybe of grandeur as well, and heroism and triumph, but it's all mixed in. It's nice and cold out here in the iceberg. Yeah. So the last question I like to ask is this: what would Caspar paint if you were here today, right now? What would he paint if you were here today, right now? Oh, you go to Mount St. Helen? Mm-hmm. And Damon and Susanna, what is primary for him? Nature or people? I think it's a mixture of both. It's the act of contemplating nature. And Zach are thinking the same things, but with proper outdoor clothes. And Amy, you've got, don't know, but the contrast with the stillness and slowness of nature with the speed of life. And Amy, that comment is making me think, maybe I've seen those images of empty cities, how the speed of life has really slowed down. And maybe the opportunities that some people take to go off on their own to contemplate nature as solace. Yeah, Molly, people wondering where all the people have gone. And Susanna, a crowd in Times Square. So Molly, yeah, that aspect of dread in nature. So the solace and dread in this case, yeah. Or those empty streets you're thinking. Yeah, the double-edged experience. A lot of people should be here, but they're not. And here nature is a threat, but not the solace. All right. Yeah, Ron, I think that's our cue here. A couple of other observations that I've heard, I'll pass these along. One was somebody staring out the window, just lonely by themselves, looking outside from the back, and they're seeing the world. Yeah. All right. I hope you enjoyed Caspar. It sounds like a lot of you were experiencing a lot of him for the first time. Any thoughts? Do you like him? Is he interesting? And Zach, you feel like you're making a friend every class? Want to go for a beer? I appreciate that comment a lot. And I'm trying to find ways of cultivating that kind of intimacy as much as possible. So I try to call the artists all by their first name and imagine the conversations that I'd have with them if I were to go out with a beer, for a beer. You get the feeling that he would rather be alone or in nature with Christian. Let's see. Oh, you're thinking Carolina. Is that what you're thinking of? The name, his wife, is that what you're thinking? And then, yeah. And let's see. Damon and Susanna, wonderful discovery. Molly, very clarifying. I feel that you like him better. I'm remembering I heard a lecture about him, did not at all understand a few years ago. Okay, good. Ashley got perhaps the doctor standing on the threshold of a hospital from behind, looking in, both prepared to do superhuman things, but also feeling overwhelmed and daunted. Interesting. Maybe outside the building of the hospital, like about to walk in. Yeah. And maybe you paint the effects of the virus. Maybe nature from a virus's point of view. And Matanya got, sometimes there are retreats in nature for veterans who suffer from PTSD. I can imagine him painting a scene of the veterans. Yeah. How do you paint a virus very carefully? Stay 6 feet away from it. Okay, everybody, that's it for next time. In 2 weeks. So we don't have a class next week. in 2 weeks, Jan Vermeer. So those of you that have signed up for the tutorials, I will be in touch with you and we'll schedule them, and we'll meet each other again for Vermeer in 2 weeks. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Luke.
All right, my pleasure, Matan.